How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another episode of the most rare and valuable coins in Canada. Today we're going to be discussing a Canadian penny from the year 1962, which, if some of you didn't know, has almost 10 different errors and varieties that you can look for that make it extremely rare and worth some really good money. The Canadian 1962 penny varieties are significant and sought after in the Canadian numismatic world because this coin has so many different variations and was made after the year 1960. It makes finding examples of them pretty easy, and this is one that you actually have a pretty decent chance finding if some Canadian pennies somehow manage to find their way into your pocket change or you are coin roll hunting. In this video, we will explore the historical context surrounding the production of this rare and valuable 1-cent coin and delve into why it holds such importance in the Canadian numismatic world. Additionally, we'll discuss the distinguishing and identifying features, its significance among collectors, and also potential value if you are ever to find a legitimate example. Before I do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also hit that bell notification so you can follow along with my new videos as they are being released. Also, make sure to stay to the end of the video if you would like to find out how much you can get for your 1962 pennies if you are curious. And then without further ado, what do you say we get right into it and discuss the 1962 Canadian penny errors and varieties? Let's get it, guys. The Canadian penny ceased production in the year 2012. The decision to stop producing Canadian pennies was a result of the coin's failing purchasing power and value and the growing manufacturing expenses. This resulted in a substantial alteration to Canada's monetary system and spurred a surge of interest among enthusiasts and collectors. The Canadian penny was officially released in the year 1858. Those were referred to as large cents or large pennies, and those remained into effect until the year 1920 when the size changed. The composition has changed many times over the years, with some of the early Canadian pennies being minted out of bronze or brass, and then eventually out of pure copper, and now out of steel plated with copper on the outside. The diameter of the penny has also changed over time, with 19.05 millimeters being the most current and well-known measurement, very similar to the American small cent. Even though the Canadian penny is no longer manufactured for circulation after the year 2012, it is still produced for collector sets, such as the specimen and proof sets released by the Canadian Mint. These collections frequently feature limited edition pennies to mark important occasions or anniversaries. Even though they aren't as widely available as they previously may have been, you can still discover pennies if you look long and hard enough. Despite its discontinuation, it still remains a highly collected item. Some of the places that you can get pennies here in Canada are from your bank by asking for a $25 box or some loose rolls, and first of all hoping that they have any, and secondly are ready to break procedure in order to give them to you. Unfortunately, every financial institution in Canada is obligated to return any pennies that have been returned to be melted down. Despite this, and also the existence of businesses like Brinks and Garter World, which also operate their own alloy recycling programs, you still may be able to find some pennies out in the wild today. Aside from financial institutions, you could always take a gander on Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, and you can also check out your local neighborhood coin shop to see if they have any bulk pennies that you can purchase. Now that we've given you guys some information on the Canadian penny, what do you say we get into these 1962 penny errors and variations, because there are a whole lot that we have to cover here, and they can all be worth some really good money if you can identify any of them. So as I mentioned earlier, there are upwards of 10 different errors or variations you can look for when it comes to your Canadian 1962 pennies. The first are the hanging varieties, the most common of which is the single hanging 2. If you look above the digit of 2 on the reverse of the coin, there should be a little line that connects from the top of the 2, curving upwards and then horizontally to the left until it touches the maple leaf. This is the result of a die clash, and depending on how late into production the dies were used with this error, the more significant it can become. There are also double and even triple hanging 2s, and the more of these die clashes or lines you can count, the more valuable this variety becomes. Then there is the missing M variety. Usually Canadian pennies will have the initial of MG at the bottom of the portrait of Queen Elizabeth on the obverse. In 1962, whether due to dye deterioration or other technical difficulties, the M in the initial is actually not visible. This variety can also be compounded with the hanging varieties to make it a double heir and increase the value substantially. There can also be doubling on the final 3 digits of the date in 1962, and depending on how many of the digits are doubled and also the significance of the doubling, it can be quite valuable. The last 2 notable variations for the 1962 Canadian pennies are also by far the most cool, and those are the guitar and harp variations. As a guitar player my whole life, this is a penny that has been on my radar for a long time, and I still have not been blessed by one of these by the coin gods, but I know other coin roll hunters who have found them, so they are out there. To identify and differentiate between the harp and guitar strings, you have to look underneath the 1 in the 1 cent on the top of the reverse of the coin, and if there are lines running vertically from the 1 to the top of the maple leaf, then you have one of these 2 very rare coins. The harp lines or strings would appear wider and more spread apart and may not be running all the way down and making contact with the maple leaf. The guitar lines or strings would be more narrow and more pronounced and would run clearly, making contact with the maple leaf. The guitar is the rarer and more valuable of the 2 varieties, so that is the one that you want to look for, but finding either one of these would definitely be a nice little treat. Now that we've discussed how to identify some of these varieties, what do you say we get into the values for these pennies? First, we will discuss the 1962 single hanging 2. One thing I do want to point out as well is most of these pennies aren't worth too much on the low end. They aren't worth too much more than face value. You might be able to get a couple dollars for them if somebody really wants them or they're trying to fill a hole in their collection. But usually to get the most amount of money from the coins that I'm mentioning, you want them to be in a high grade state. So that means MS60 to MS67. So to identify the single hanging 2 1962, you want to look for the hook that connects from the top of the 2 to the bottom of the maple leaf. If you can identify that, it can be worth around $9 for an MS60 to an MS62 example. This one can be worth around $300 for an MS66, and it could easily be worth up to $500 to $750 if you were to find one and it scored an MS67, which is extremely hard for Canadian coins. It's very rare that Canadian coins score MS66 or MS67, but never say never. If you're able to find an uncirculated roll of these, there's no reason they may be able to score a high grade like the MS66 or MS67 territory. Then there's the 1962 double hanging 2. Now to identify this one, it'll be very similar to the single hanging 2, but you want to look for multiple lines. There should be at least 2 of them. And in terms of value, it can be worth around $800 for an MS67 example, so it is just slightly more valuable and rare than the single hanging 2 variety. And then there is the triple hanging 2. Now this one is much more rare than the single or double hanging 2 varieties. It's worth around $38 if you find one in an MS60 or MS62, but you see some massive price jumps with this coin. If you were to find one and it scored anywhere near an MS66 or MS67, it could easily be worth thousands of dollars. If it scored in the MS67 territory, you could easily be talking a $3,000 coin. This is a pretty significant error for it to have 3 die clashes and get the triple hanging designation. So definitely the hanging 2s are good varieties to look for. Then there's the 1962 missing M variety. To identify this one, you want to look at the bottom of the portrait of Queen Elizabeth, and in most cases when you check for this heir, you're going to see the initials MG, but if you ever check and that M is missing, you have one rare 1962 penny that can be worth $377 for an MS66 example, and this coin could see a significant price jump as well. It could easily be worth up to $750 if it did score in the MS67 range. Now, even more rare and valuable than the missing M variety is the 1962 missing M with the hanging 2. Now, this would be known as a double heir because it contains 2 significant heirs. So to identify this, it needs to have the die clash, giving it the hanging 2, and it will also have the missing M for the initials MG. If you can identify both of these, it can be worth around $205 for an MS65, but it could be worth all the way up to $2,500 for an MS67 if you were to find one and it graded that high. It would seem that they were having a lot of problems with their dies in the year 1962, and your chances of being able to find some of these pennies, even with the double heir, are not the worst ever. So keep your eyes out for a missing M and a hanging 2 on your 1962 pennies. Then there are the 1962s that can contain doubling on the final 3 digits. Now, if it has a double 2, it can be worth around $50 for an MS65. If it has a doubled 9, 6, and 2, so the final 3 digits all contain machine doubling or die deterioration, then it adds a pretty significant premium. It can be worth around $100 for an MS65, so the price actually jumps to 2 times the value if it only has doubling on the single digit, and it could easily see some massive price jumps and be worth up to $500 to $1,000 if it's scored in the MS67 range. And then last but not least, we have the 2 string varieties of the 1962 pennies, and those are the harp and guitar string varieties. Now first is the harp variety. To identify this, you want to look below the 1 on 1 cent on the reverse of the coin, and there should be lines running vertically from the bottom of the 1 to the top of the maple leaf. The strings on the harp will look wider and less pronounced. This one can be worth around $380 for an MS66 example, but if you were to find one and it scored any higher, it could be worth up to $1,000 for an MS67. Now the 1962 guitar variety is the rarer of the 2 string varieties for the 1962 pennies. It's worth around $100 for an MS64 example, so it's probably worth around $300 for an MS65. Currently MS64 is the highest graded known example, so if you were able to find one of the 1962 guitar pennies and it graded any higher than MS64, then you would have one very, very rare coin that could easily be worth up to $1,500 for an MS67. To identify this, you want to look under the 1 on 1 cent on the reverse of the coin, and it should have lines running vertically connecting to the top of the maple leaf. The lines should be more narrow and more pronounced on the guitar variety. What do you guys think about the Canadian 1962 penny varieties? What would you ever do if you found a legitimate example, or if you have ever found any of the coins discussed in this video? Let me know down in the comments. Also, I would really appreciate if you guys would hit that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also hit that bell notification so you can stay up to date with my new content as it is being released. But I think that is pretty much going to do it for this one, folks. So thank you so much everybody for watching, but until the next one, peace out and have a good one, y'all.